Cheney is here. Always good to see you. Good
well,
to
great
get you
to be
in
back.
here anyway. And also been joined by news director here at the Bighorn Radio Network. Bryce is in here with us. So good to see you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
So anyway, first of all, let's get to why you're up in this. You didn't come up here just to see us. I know that. So
Listen, I came for Speak Your Piece.
So anyway, but you are up here because you do have some engagements that you're going to be partaking in over the next day or two. Anyway,
that's right, exactly. Well, tonight is the Medical Foundation benefit that we'll be at, and then headed over to Gillette tomorrow. They've got their Bighorn Basin Radio Network Business Expo going on there. So got a full couple of days.
Okay. You cover a lot of ground around the Cowboy State, don't you?
Absolutely. And it's there's no place more beautiful, and there's a lot of distance between every voter, so it's a lot of time on the road.
That is true, yes. But like you say, you've got a lot of beautiful scenery to look at.
Yeah, as well, especially mornings like this one. It just couldn't be more beautiful.
That's true. I like this kind of a day as long as the roads are good.
Yes, exactly. No, that's right.
So a little snow on the grass, that part's fine, but as long as the roads are dry.
That is the key thing.
That's the main thing anyway. So that is always good to have. Hey, good morning to you. Speak your piece.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Liz, for coming to Cody and coming to speak your piece this morning.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just have a question. I need to know what your stance is on abortion and where you stand with that, and I'll just take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate that. I'm strongly pro-life. Believe that life begins at conception, and believe obviously that that's something that we need to make sure that we support, and that we care for the unborn, and it's something I'm very committed to.
Now, why have you had to make these statements as of late? Because I've noticed that you've had to come out and fight some pretty I guess egregious claims otherwise.
Well, no. I mean, look, I think that first of all, in an election, in a campaign, there are a whole range of issues that are deeply important to people, and people rightly want to know what your stance is on those. And so I've been, happy and honored to be able to talk about those things. Yeah. There have been sort of some shadowy out-of-state, at least one shadowy out-of-state group involved in some ads that mischaracterize my position on issues. But, I think that goes with the territory to some extent. I clearly am running a campaign that's against the establishment in many ways, and, looking for change. Very firmly committed to the idea that the status quo and business as usual won't cut it anymore. And so, I knew coming into this that there would be folks who wanted to protect and defend the establishment and defend the status quo, who would come in against me. I think, though, I know that the people of Wyoming, don't take kindly to that, frankly, and they don't want people in Washington telling them how they ought to vote. And they understand that this seat belongs to the people of Wyoming, and they're going to make the decision about who represents us in Washington. So I'm going to continue to be focused on working hard to earn every single vote here in Wyoming.
Yeah. Now with the budget issue, the government just opened up yesterday, but we understand that it's been said what Congress passed essentially kicks the can. Right, down the road. What do you think when the Congress has to sit down January, February, and during that time and rehash all this out? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, I think there are three things, it looks to me, based on the news reports, fundamentally wrong with this deal that they agreed to. The first is that members of Congress, the senators, House of Representatives and their staff still have a special deal under Obamacare. And I think they're hoping that that's going to sort of be, beneath the radar and that folks won't realize it because there's so much else going on. But as I understand it, they're still going to get a special subsidy when they buy into exchanges. And I'd like to know how many of them have begun buying into the exchanges, how many of them are using that special subsidy. That's got to end. And we got to get back to, having those, our senators in particular and our members of Congress stand up and say, we won't accept this. We're going to return the subsidy to the Treasury. Across the board nationally, I think we ought to have all of our representatives say that. Secondly, you've seen these reports of pork, and in particular, close to $3 billion in the deal that helps Senator McConnell, Senator Alexander, and some others. And that's just wrong. And I think people are very frustrated with that here we are, even at a moment of ultimate crisis when, we're trying to deal with the potential of, default on the debt and the government shutdown, and the senators are still putting pork in the legislation for themselves. And if you needed any evidence that Washington was truly and completely broken, to me, that's it. And that's a pretty clear sign that it's time for a change. And thirdly, there's language in the bill, as I understand it, that basically removes the ability of Congress going forward to have the kind of impact and authority over debt ceiling increases that they've had in the past, and essentially flips around the procedure. So, you have a situation where you can have members of Congress voting against an increase, and then the president can veto that, and unless you get, 2/3 to override, the increase goes into effect. And again, I think that may well be unconstitutional, but according to the news reports I've seen, it's very concerning. I think, whenever you've got Congress giving away its authority like that, it looks to me like, rather than saying, hey, how should we do the job we were sent here to do, they're trying to avoid responsibility. And I just, I think it's pretty clear, given everything that's gone on in Washington and given what's been a very unsatisfactory resolution of the problem, people are rightly totally fed up. And it's why we need new blood and why we need a new generation there.
You mentioned you're sent to Washington basically to do the job you're elected to do. Okay. From your opinion, what is your job that you are elected to do?
Well, I think, speaking from the perspective of the job I'm seeking now, running to be one of Wyoming's senators, number one, your job is to protect and defend the values and the freedom of the people of Wyoming, and to do everything you can, and in this current atmosphere, particularly, to make sure that the federal government isn't allowed to continue the kind of massive overreach that we've seen now just become completely unsustainable during the Obama administration. And in large part, in today's context, the job of our senators has to be to defend and protect our industry. It's got to be to stand up and fight for things like the coal industry, fight for our ranchers. It's got to be also to, get the federal government out of, I'd like to see them, get out of largely the fossil fuels business. And let's let, the people of Wyoming get access to those resources that have such potential for us without having to deal with the massive government red tape and bureaucracy that's been created. So a large part of this is rolling back the federal government, reducing taxes, giving people the ability really to build their own businesses and build their own lives and keep more what they earn. Yeah,
but I think if you're going to roll back the federal government, you can't do it just for Wyoming. You've got to do it for all 50 states out there.
Yeah, well, right, but the job of the senator from Wyoming is really to look after Wyoming. And what that means is you've got a special responsibility when it comes to things like the coal industry. And you ought to be, known as the leading advocate and the leading fighter for things like coal, because it matters so deeply to Wyoming. I don't want to see Wyoming senator focused on things that don't matter to Wyoming. You got to care about what happens here. And Wyoming is such a special place, and it is so clearly ground zero in terms of this administration's policies and targeting us, that we've got to have somebody back there who is really fighting this fight effectively, to defend and protect Wyoming values.
Okay, now you're going against Mike Enzi. He's been in there for 17, 18 years now, whatever it's been anyway. Okay. Obviously, you got into this race because there were things Mike Enzi maybe did or didn't do that you just didn't like. And what are some of those things that you might have done differently had you been in office over the past few years?
Yeah. Well, look, I think, Mike is a nice man. This race is certainly not personal. But I do think that business as usual isn't going to suffice to protect Wyoming values. Mm-hmm. And, right now we stand at a critical moment of decision. The next 3.5 years will determine whether the president's policies take hold deeply over the long term. And it's going to require a fighter. Mike participated in the Gang of Six, for example, back at the beginning of Obamacare. He was one of the very few Republicans who thought it was a good idea to negotiate with the White House to establish this huge new federal entitlement. Now, ultimately, Mike voted against what came out of that process, but for month after month after month, he gave the White House cover. He allowed the president to say, look, we got Republicans on board with us. And I certainly would have opposed it from the very beginning. I would not have participated in that kind of negotiation. Mike is, his main hallmark piece of legislation is the internet sales tax. And I just fundamentally disagree with that. I don't think that we need our senator to be imposing new taxes. I think that we ought to protect bricks and mortar businesses by lowering their tax burden. And I don't think Wyoming senators should be looking for ways to take money out of the pockets of the people of Wyoming to send to places like California and New York. I believe that the government's got more than enough money, and our representatives, our senators, ought to be looking for ways we can reduce people's tax burden, not increase it.
Yeah, I noticed. I remember years ago when they were talking about the internet sales tax and stuff like that. Well, gee, it was unfair because a lot of internet sites didn't pay any sales tax at all, and it just was not fair to the local businesses, let's say here in town, that do have to collect sales tax and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I think, partly what's gone on now is, number one, you got a lot of local businesses that have an internet presence. And number two, as I said, we ought to reduce their tax burden.
Yeah.
And that's the best way, frankly, to level the playing field here.
Yeah. Instead of trying to figure out, okay, how do we raise everybody's taxes so they're equal? Well, how do we lower everybody's taxes so they're equal? You still come out with an equal taxation here.
Yeah, but with private business and private individuals able to keep more, which I think at the end of the day is a much better solution.
That's true. Hey, good morning to you. Speak your piece.
Good morning. I'd like to ask a question. Our community colleges are facing a financial problem because so many of their students from Wyoming are coming in and needing a lot of remediation. And the Common Core ups the standards so that they might not have as many. What is your stand on Common Core?
Thank you for the question. I have a lot of concerns about Common Core. And I think that if you look at, the intent of Common Core, it may well be what you laid out. It may well be to try to increase standards. But I think that in many ways they're the wrong standards. I think that it is yet sort of one more example of the federal government coming in and trying to tell us how we should educate our kids. I think the solution in terms of improving education and improving the quality of our kids' education is to give more control to local schools, more control to teachers, and more authority to parents. Because I think that ultimately Common Core hasn't been tested. And, we're using our kids as guinea pigs, basically, to test this whole range of new standards that have never been tried anyplace before. And secondly, Common Core comes along with a whole range of new data collection requirements, which I just think are very dangerous and concerning, where, it's one thing if your school administrator has educational data about your kids. That's understandable. It helps them figure out how best to teach your kids. But when you get to the place with, Race to the Top and Common Core, where that data is being collected by the Department of Education, and the Department of Education, since early 2011, decided unilaterally it could give all that data about our kids, give or sell it to third parties.
Just a minute. We've had our attorney from Powell at the Cody School District and answering questions because this type of thing has been presented, and the attorney is not saying that all of what you are saying is correct. And so I think we have a lot of things being said at these Common Core meetings that when you get the superintendents in, or you get people from Cheyenne who are with the State Department in, or you get the attorneys in, some of these things that are being said are not correct. And that's one of the things I have a real problem with the Tea Party right now in Wyoming, and what they're doing with Common Core is when you get to the people who truly are informed, what is being said is not the way it really is.
Well, I think that, you put your finger on the depth of emotion there is around this issue. And, I'm speaking about it in part as a mom. I have 4 kids in Wyoming public schools, and I'm really concerned about it as a mom. And I'm concerned about, what Common Core does in many ways. First of all, it is going to focus on teaching kids about history. Let's talk about history, for example. The Common Core approach here is you say, well, we're going to teach kids about the Gettysburg Address, but we're not going to teach them about it in the context of what was happening at that moment and why Abraham Lincoln was standing on that hallowed ground.
Just a minute.
You know what? Wait, no. Well, let me answer. Because I think these are they're important issues that you're raising. But people's concerns about this is that you've got a whole new set of curricula that are being developed and imposed on our kids without having done any testing anyplace else, number one. Number two, this whole emphasis of moving the kids away from literature into nonfiction. Now, I'm a big fan of nonfiction. I love to read history. But I think that it's important for the kids also to have the benefit of the great works and not, frankly, to be in a situation where they're encouraged to be reading instruction manuals instead of the great works of literature.
Just a minute.
No, but I understand it's a deeply emotional issue. And what I would say to you is I don't believe that we ought to be imposing this brand new curriculum on all of our kids that's been untested and that people have real concerns about and that has this massive data collection piece to it. It's not about Tea Party. It's not about Republican. It's not about Democrat. It really is about, what's best for the kids. And we have 60 years now of evidence of the role of the federal government in education, and the record is a very, very poor one. And so as a mom, that's really where my concerns come from.
Okay, well, my concerns come from the fact that when you talk with superintendents, they say you can teach the old literature. This thing that, like, for example, what you just said is not correct, that you can teach those basic old classic pieces of literature. And as far as the new curriculum, that also is a falsehood. The teachers are not given a new curriculum. Some of the standards are upped a little bit, but they can choose how to teach it.
Right, but
this is my concern.
Right, but the problem is that the tests that are required, it becomes an issue of how much time do you have in a classroom. And you can say teachers, they can teach anything they want, but the teachers themselves are going to be assessed based on the tests. And the racket of the test is a whole other area you need to look into. And there are only 1 or 2 companies in the whole country that are going to be administering Common Core tests. And those companies are going to be making a killing off of states like Wyoming that are now going to be in the process of having to impose a whole new set of assessments and tests on our kids. So it's one thing, it's fine to say, well, a teacher can teach what they want, but the teacher gets assessed based on this new set of Common Core tests and how the kids do on those tests.
But the thing is, we want our students in Wyoming to be competitive with the students in other states.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the amount of money that the state of Wyoming is putting into education today, and you look at what we are getting back from it, it's not equivalent.
No,
and we need to do something about that.
Yeah, you and I completely agree on that. I think it's very important that, our kids in Wyoming have the best education in the world. And I think the question is, how do we get there? And I simply am very, very skeptical because, I go back to this notion that you've had Republican and Democratic presidents, try to impose a federal system of education. And, you saw
but
it in
the Common Core is not doing that. That's another falsehood.
Well,
when you get with your
no, I don't think that's right, actually.
No, I think it is. When you get with the superintendents, I'm not informed enough on it. I'm a retired teacher, but I'm not informed enough on it. But they can tell you how this is another one of the falsehoods.
Well, listen, I appreciate your view on that, but I really think if you go back and look at it, Common Core is a nationwide federal Obama administration program, which is connected to their Race to the Top program. And we all, I think everybody this is an area where we all can find common ground in terms of everybody wants our kids to get the best education possible. But we have a 60-year history now of the federal government's role in education and the Department of Education's role in education, which, in my view, is hurting our kids. And so I don't want to see us go down the path of yet one more experiment with our kids as guinea pigs. I just think that's dangerous to the kids, and it's, I don't want, certainly my own kids, to be in a situation where we're testing out this brand new thing on them, not knowing whether or not it works. And my view always would be, let's go back to giving the teachers in the classrooms more authority. Let's go back to giving the schools more authority. And let's go back to giving the parents more authority, because that's frankly where we're going to see the kind of improvement we all want to see with our kids.
All righty, and I got to get one more break out of the way, all righty, and we will be right back right after these messages. All righty, we're at about 3 minutes away from the top of the hour, and we do want to welcome everybody back to Speak Your Piece. Liz Cheney in with me today. Bryce is here as well.
Oh, thank you, Tom. So, Liz, as you're preparing to go into the race, you're setting things up with your campaign. What do you see as being the biggest challenges for you?
Well, I think certainly any time that you're challenging an incumbent, you start out as an underdog, and obviously. I thought long and hard about that before getting into this race, about what it would mean to be challenging an incumbent. I'm interested to see sort of what Senator Enzi's timing will be. He hasn't formally announced yet. He said that he intends to announce, but hasn't formally launched his campaign. And obviously he'll do that on his own time. From my perspective, I felt it was very important to begin, a year out at least, in order to run a campaign the way I really believe they ought to be run, and frankly the way, we here in Wyoming expect them to be run, which is person to person, face to face, one vote at a time. People very rightly and they're very justified in understanding that they want to have had the chance to talk directly to you about their concerns and your views on issues before they cast a vote for you. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing, for the next year here.
Okay. Well, that's music, and we've got to go now, all right? So, but thank you for stopping by for a somewhat abbreviated version of you anyway. I do appreciate it.
No, absolutely. We'll talk to you again.
All righty. That's going to